My very special guest has spent the past 20 years helping businesses, organizations, and individuals do more good by connecting people, ideas, and community assets. She knows how to balance profit with purpose and how to use business as a force for good. She's an owner of Deikos Inc. and author of the books Reclaiming We and Philanthropy for All. She is Tammy Day. Welcome to the show, Tammy.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm excited. We had a conversation a little bit ago. We were introduced by our mutual friend Joshua, and Joshua Berry wrote a great book of his own. And he said, Matt, you got to meet Tammy. I said, I'm happy to, and I'm so glad that we did. And now here we are.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this. In our previous conversation, you shared something with me that really resonated, and that's how you had experienced at one point something that you called a work midlife crisis. That landed on me like a ton of bricks. So, what happened leading up to that, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. So my husband and I own our business in Norfolk, Nebraska, and we employ about 60 people. And it was probably, oh gosh, I bet 10 years ago now. We just kind of got to a point where it felt like we had achieved a lot of our goals. Things were going well, which you would think, well, great, that's super. But maybe our Midwestern work ethic drives us to see what's the next thing. And so we found ourselves wondering, kind of like, now what do we do? And so, yeah, just a period of discerning what was next, having lots of conversations about where to go from here, what to do, and really thinking about from the business perspective, why do we exist? Which we originally would have said we know why we exist, right? We exist to serve our customers and to provide, the best resources and service for them that we can. But if you really drill into that why, it can help you kind of open up other possibilities. And so for us, that sort of crisis period was a time to pause, take an assessment of where things were, and then figure out what's the next iteration of Dayco's, our company, going forward. So it was a process that probably took a year, ish to muddle through, and then things started to become clear and some direction started to take shape.
It's amazing because I hear this often when it comes to individuals where we have had some level of success and we get to the point where we're like, I'm supposed to be happy, so why aren't I
Right.
happy just yet? But to experience it through the eyes of a business owner who says, yeah,
Hmm.
try imagining that on a grand scale of our entire
Right.
business, but there's a lot of similarities there, it seems.
Hmm. Yes.
And the term I hear a lot of times is, people will tell me, I feel hollow, like something's missing, like there
Mm-hmm.
should be more." And it sounds like some of that
Hmm.
was going on for you to say, the business has a purpose, we're having success in the traditional sense, but
Right.
really, there's gotta be more here, right?
Right. Yes. And I think, luckily we were smart enough to pay attention to that. And I think it really was just a chance to regroup. I feel like, I don't know about other people, but I'm often head down. What's next? Let's keep going. And we don't often take time to pause and reflect on what has been, how far we've come, what kinds of things we can celebrate. And so once we did that, it kind of helped move on to the next phase. And so seeing that as an opportunity as opposed to a frustration, it initially was a frustration, but I think at least we, were able to take that and turn it into something really positive for our business.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that it's so true that what starts off as a frustration, though, you came to see it as an opportunity. You went through a process you
Hmm.
just had mentioned as discerning, right? So, as you start to look and exercise that judgment and say, "What is possible for us?" And then later, I think also in that same conversation, you had mentioned something to me that you refer to as this virtuous flywheel effect, which I love because of the mechanics of business, but now we've got virtue in there too. So, can you tell us what
Right.
that is and specifically how it works at Dacos?
Yeah, sure. So the virtuous flywheel was actually, we call it now our stakeholder wheel, but I still think that it's interesting to view it in the sort of virtuous flywheel way. But that came out of some of this discerning, and so really trying to figure out what our purpose was going forward. Our company had always been a great place to work. We really took the legacy of the family business when we bought the business and tried to double down on that. Family friendly, great place, treat people well. Also a very generous community partner. But part of what came out of the discerning was that we had a real opportunity here to do more with this opportunity of having a business and getting to really run that in the way that we wanted to. And so when we started looking at those opportunities, we realized that our customers were a definite why of what we did in the world and why we exist. But there were other people who were part of that equation. Our employees were certainly part of that. Our stakeholders would also include our community. We're in a small town in Nebraska, about 25,000 people, and being an employer and being a good community partner is really impactful. And then we also look at another stakeholder as the company as a whole. So for us, if you put these things in a circle, company, community, employee, and customers, anytime you make an investment at any point in the stakeholder wheel, you get positive outcomes. So let's say we make investments in our community, we're a good community partner. People see that, they think, oh, I want to work for a company like that who takes the time to do more than just their business, right? They invest in the community. So then we hire the best people because they want to work in a place like that. Those people provide excellent services for our customers. Those customers benefit from that. Their businesses grow and they hire us to do more things, which then causes our company stakeholder to profit and benefit. And then we can take those profits and reinvest them back in the community. And so the wheel turns. And I would argue that, the more you're intentional about those investments, sort of the faster the flywheel goes, right? And so I believe a lot of our current success is due to um, the investments we've made in a balanced stakeholder model, which we call the virtuous flywheel. So,
It's amazing because the analogy, it's got such great energy in it and momentum, and like you said, as it picks up sort of speed, it sort of, fulfills and
mhm,
nurtures itself almost, and I think that it's very, counterintuitive in some ways to think, "Well, how are we gonna invest resources and time into our community, for example? There's so many day-to-day business problems. Don't those need all of our attention?" So, I think you
mhm,
found this way of saying that, "Well, hold on a second, if we invest in the right way in each of these
right.
stakeholders, each kinda leads and fulfills the next."
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that, increasingly, I guess I've seen as a researcher what you lived, which is always an exciting
Mhm.
conversation for us to have, and I see so many organizations that focus on really, the client work I do, the consulting work I do, we focus a lot on the business, production, traditional
Mhm.
metrics. A lot of it too, though, thankfully, focuses on people and the welfare of people's employee engagement and employee well-being and these types of things. And then I see some matriculate on to where you are today, which is where you're saying, what is this potential we
Mhm.
have to do something even beyond our own internal, four walls? And so I come across these things around stakeholder capitalism, conscious capitalism, lots of movements like this.
Mhm.
And I kind of couch them as these, how do we do well and do good? In a systematic
Right.
way, because businesses are economic engines, if you will. But you went through this challenging process kind of in this vein around B Corporation certification.
Mhm.
And so my question for you, Tammy, is what led you to take the route of becoming, one of Nebraska's only certified B Corps?
Yes. So yes, when we were figuring out this new path to purpose as a company, um, we wanted to make sure that one of our tenants was that we put some real solid foundational frameworks around what we were doing. One, to hold us accountable, to help us have a peer group to learn from, and to indicate to our stakeholders that this was more about who we are and not a program or a passing thing that we were going to try, right? It was going to be deeply ingrained in the business in all kinds of ways. And so we looked at different frameworks, studied conscious capitalism a lot, and actually you'll see things the stakeholder idea shows up in conscious capitalism, if you're a fan of that framework. And then decided that the B Corp certification was a way for us to see, compared to other companies, how did we rank as far as doing good in the world, right? Beyond just making money. And so it is a rigorous process and has actually gotten more rigorous in the time that we've been a B Corp. Um, and you're measured in many areas of how you operate: governance, workers, community, environment. And so then you receive a score, and you have to hit a certain threshold in that scoring to be considered a B Corp and receive that certification. So for us, it was a way to learn, it was a way to kind of see where we were at, and to have a group of people who were trying to do things differently and in a way that had real impact outside of just how much money does your business make. And so for us, it was a way to really shore up our work and to send a message to our stakeholders about, what this was really about. We are also a Nebraska benefit corporation, which states can have benefit corporations that you can file for. It's a different process. It doesn't change your tax status in any way, but it's just another way to sort of indicate who you are and what you're about. And one of the benefits we get from being a benefit corporation in Nebraska is that every year we have to send in a report to the Secretary of State accounting for all the ways that we have contributed to the greater good. And so I think that's a nice nudge for people to do the reflection piece that we so often overlook, and to sort of celebrate those wins in your journey.
It's incredible to think that you went through this journey, you're saying there's gotta be something more, you decided on something more and then said, "Okay, we're not done yet. We're going to both prove to ourselves, right, to our internal employees and stakeholders through something like, the B Corp certification." I love that you also got some learning and some measurement, quantified some things. Where do we stand? What are other people doing? But then also didn't stop there and took on yet another sort of recognition. So you're really providing a lot of validation or verification that we're walking the talk here. And I think that
Mhm.
that's got to be a form of energy and proof and social credibility and all these things that also contributes to that flywheel effect.
Yes, yes, definitely. And for us, you'll see B Corp logos on different companies' marketing. And for us, that's really never been a driving factor. We have that out in some of our messaging, but it wasn't about the marketing aspect. It was about really trying to be better and to have some sort of way to check in around that and continue to grow.
I was on a Zoom call the other day, and one of the participants had her background up, and she had the B Corp logo, and I commented
No.
on it, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you know what that is?" And I said, I know Tammy, so I know what that is." I said, "I also know it's not easy," and she goes, "Oh, it's not easy, but it's
No.
great." That's what she said. So
Yeah.
it was not the best recognized symbol, but for people who
No.
know what it is and what it entails, it's very meaningful. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very
Yes.
cool. Now, last year, well, I should say, let me start with this one. When you think about you mentioned the employees, and if you hire the
Mhm.
right employees, then they're going to really support the business. And I think in our conversation, you really blew me away with when you were describing some of these employee-led efforts, right?
Mhm.
So you get your employees, you mobilize them, you kind of help them as well. But in general, like, what does it look like? And shouldn't these people who work for you be doing actual work for the business? Like, how does that work?
Right. Yes. So through this whole thoughtful, process that we went through, our initial reaction to what was next or what else could we do with this opportunity that we have to make a difference through our company, we really initially thought about, well, we could give away more money, right? And I'm almost, cringe when I think about that now, because to me, that's a really short sighted way to think about how can we create impact in the world. Because while money is important, it's not the thing that moves the needle over time. And so luckily we were smart enough to really kind of wrestle with that and realize that, we have 60 people that work for us. and what could happen if those 60 people had true ownership in this change making effort that we were trying to accomplish, right? How would that impact their lives? How would they share that with their kids, with their neighbors, with their grandparents, right? And then those ripple effects going out into the world, to me, that's where real change could happen. And so when we built out sort of what we call Deikos for Good, and we can talk about that as just a way for us to speak about the work, it was important that we focused on our purpose to do good and be good, and that those efforts were led in large part by the people who work at the company, not by Brandon and Tammy Day, not by the leadership team, right? It is truly by the people in the company. And so our employees have ownership over what kinds of investments get made in the community, and they work really hard together to figure out how to honor the wishes of their peers who have said these are the things that are important to us. And so they are actively learning and growing into that space as an individual on behalf of Deikos. And so, whether they're making investments in the community, or even we have a group that focuses on just employees and their families and what kinds of things could help their lives be better, right? And so, we have seen tremendous outcomes from having that ownership piece in our efforts, be letting that be distributed across many people. And it's really incredible to see people grow into that, and I think it really is what allows our efforts to be very sustainable, because you may have heard I use this a lot, but the phrase, "No one washes a rental car," because if you don't own something, you don't take care of it, and so having that real ownership, I think makes all the difference in the work that we're doing.
I have
Oh, you
rental.
asked me about why people wouldn't do their real work. I forgot to answer that question. Okay, but to us, this is part of your real work.
Yeah.
So we do not ask people to do this on the weekend or in the evenings. They take time out of their day, and we account for that when we're resourcing our teams, that people will be spending time on these efforts. Because again, if your focus is on stakeholder balance, then you have to keep all those parts in play. We can't sacrifice one stakeholder for another. And so they work with their teams to cover for them while they're in a committee meeting or doing a visit to a nonprofit or whatever the case may be. And that was a tough thing initially to get people to really embrace, because it was almost like, well, no, I mean, you said that, but that can't be true. And it really is true. We work hard to make people feel comfortable and confident in that space, that they can take the time to do what they need to do. Because again, if you've got that flywheel, there's not one part that's more important than the other. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
I could see the reaction being like, "No, wait, you really mean this? Like, I can
Right.
use time?" Like, I'm trying to think, like, and I don't know how it works, but if you're an employee and you're like, "I wanna actually participate," that might be the first level where you're like,
Hmm.
"I can actually use my quote, unquote, "work time" to actually participate."
Hmm.
And the other is, not only that, you have some agency here, like, where do you wanna help? Like, come in and make a
Right.
proposal about where we're going to be investing. This is really employee-led. It's
Hmm.
staggering to me to think what must be going on in their minds when they're like, "Is this really how this works here?" And there people are like, "Yeah, we've been here for a long time. This is
Hmm.
exactly how it works."
Yeah.
It takes me back to a line that I saw in your book, Philanthropy for All, because this is really what we're talking about is whether we're talking about you mentioned, like, giving money or whether we're talking about mobilizing a stakeholder group like employees, like we've just
Hmm.
been talking. But you issue this challenge, which I absolutely love, which says, "A money matters most perception of philanthropy that limits our understanding of what it means to do good in the world and perpetuates an outdated limiting belief that making a difference is only for certain people." So I absolutely endorse that 100%. It's almost like if the only way you get to play and be philanthropic is because you can write a check, that
Hmm.
by definition, that limits who gets to play and how much. But I just wonder if you can
Right.
tell me more about what led you to make that observation the way that you wrote it in your book like that.
Mhm. Yes, yes, and that theme, it really is what holds my book together, I think, even though that was not my intention when I started out, it was more about how do we help people engage in community and philanthropic efforts. But really, through my work over the years, and even in the work in the company, I have realized is that a lot of people do not see themselves as someone who has anything to offer. They have been told through, our societal messaging that money is what matters, and if you're not a Warren Buffett or a Bill Gates person, then your gifts might not be that important. And to me, that's very limiting because when people don't see themselves as part of the solution, they really won't consider what else they can do in the world. And so, if we can help people see that everyone really can make a difference, and that in fact, for things to get better, we need people to be a part of that solution. I really think it unleashes a whole host of underutilized assets in our world that could be brought to bear in our communities for all kinds of issues and amenities and challenges that we have. But until we can help people shift their perception of what that philanthropy is and how they can engage in giving back, I think it's really difficult to convince someone to, participate in something else. And we often find people that are doing charitable work in some ways. Maybe they're helping their neighbor, they're volunteering at the pancake feed, or they, scoop the snow for their church or whatever. But if you said to them, "Oh, you're such a philanthropist," you would probably get a laugh and they would think, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not me." Right. And I think, again, helping people see that what they're doing has value opens up ways for them to do more. If I believe that I have something to offer, then I might consider what else I could do in the world. So it's a really critical piece of my work. And in our company, I think having the employee led piece allows people to actually truly experience that and not me just telling them that, right? So if you give people ways to have meaningful hands-on engagement, it can definitely change the way they view themselves and how they engage in communities, whether that community is a town or a business or a school or whatever. So,
I also think, like, people work hard, 9 to 5, regular job, and then we say, "Oh, you should be charitable, like, on the weekends and stuff," and they're like, "I'm exhausted," and what does that even
mhm,
mean? Like, now I gotta go do more homework to
yeah,
figure out how I can actually contribute, versus what
mhm,
you're describing, which is saying, "We actually have an avenue," and I'm sure you have some people who are like, "I'm gonna participate, but I'm not gonna lead an effort right now because maybe I've got some other
mhm,
stuff going on at work or in life," but others who are like, "No, you know what? Something I became aware of, and now I want to lead an initiative here as part of this program." So and everywhere in
yeah,
between, I'm sure. So it's really, mobilizing in that way that it reduces
mhm.
these barriers to people feeling great about the work that they're doing in their community and therefore also at work. It's incredible.
Yes. Yes, and I think, companies can take many different approaches to how to start helping people enter that space. So for us, we have the committees that make decisions, they do all kinds of things. We also host a couple of all company giving events. One recently that some people led was that they worked with some nonprofits to figure out what kinds of supplies they needed, and then had basically the supermarket express competition where people ran through the building packing these suitcases, and then they were all donated to the various nonprofits. So we give people ways to engage that way. We also have a paid volunteer hour per month that you can use if you want to try something out, but perhaps your life stage or that you're in doesn't allow for time outside of work. So you could use that. We also talk a lot about how even if you're not the person doing the volunteer activity, you covering for your coworker and helping make sure our customer commitments are met while the other person does that is in fact a way to give back. And so I think companies can find all kinds of ways to engage in that don't have anything to do with money, and give people a true experience because there's something about having that feeling of having been a part of that that I think really moves the needle for people.
It's a massive perspective shift, and like you said, it's not always about money, even on the part of the
Mhm,
individual or the organization, but it's about looking at our opportunities differently, looking at I love what you just said, which is like, "I'm gonna cover for somebody so that they can go do the
mhm,
shoveling or they can do the supermarket sweep,"
right.
and I'm still helping. I see myself as connected to that
Mhm,
beneficial work. It's mind-blowing to me, and your philosophy and your approach, I probably have a misunderstanding of this, but this program you have of Deikos for Good. How is how is that program? Is that something that other organizations can learn from? Is it just the way you run your internals? What is Deikos for Good?
mhm. Yeah, so our company's name is Deikos, and when we were going through this process, we kept trying to figure out a way to talk about it, and really came down to needing a name or a thing, even though it's not a program, it's more of a philosophy. Deikos for Good encompasses all that we do under the umbrella. So Deikos is obviously our company. For has two meanings. It's our four stakeholders, right? Company, community, employees, and customers. It also means for good, which could mean forever. It could mean for the benefit of others, right? So it was a way to kind of create this interesting phrase that we could use to talk about what we do. And now many things that we do, we tie back to that. Are we doing good and being good, right? Whether it's with our customers, with our community, or our employees, and it allows us to have a common language within our company. It also allows us to share our stories. So there's a book about the company and how businesses can be a force for good. Chapter 5 in my book talks about that. But we've even pulled that out and printed a separate little booklet called Business for Good. And it's the Dayco story. And so we have been able to share that, then really targeted information with our customers, with our industry partners, with anyone who is interested in how are you guys doing this? How does this work? And so it really breaks down the key components of how we are approaching doing business with purpose. It is not the only way to do business with purpose, but I do find, and we found this as well in our journey, that it's helpful to hear what other people are doing and how they're framing things, and you can take parts from, different things. So we are all about this rising tides raise all ships mentality, and so we wanted to broadly share everything that we're about, with the hope of inspiring others, because again, I believe that's the way things get better, right? Is that more people, more companies, more organizations have a broader understanding of what it means to do good in the world, and they're finding ways to kind of walk that path.
I love that it's like every phrase, every sentence that just the thought that you put into the name Deikos for Good, for example, everything is just loaded with meaning. It's just dripping. I feel like I could continue the conversation for
Yeah,
hours, but my listeners would be really upset with me. So what I'll do
right.
is I'll shift us. We've had so much meaning. I have to shift us to something trivial. In that, I'd love to
Okay.
ask my guest a trivia question. Now, you and I are a team. We're going to get a trivia question posed to us by AI, which is always great. But I
Okay.
saw, Tammy, that you live in Johnny Carson's hometown.
Mhm.
Johnny Carson, legendary late night talk show host. And so, what I'm going to have for us is we're going to get this question about Johnny Carson. I'm not sure.
Oh
Did you ever
gosh.
watch him growing up, or you just know that him
Oh
from the
yeah,
hometown?
yes,
Yeah,
I'm old enough to have watched Johnny Carson a bit,
yeah,
and in our town, when you're a small town and that's your claim to fame, there's a lot in our museum, and we have a Great American Comedy Festival every summer, and
yeah.
so I think for a lot of people he lives on, right?
He does. Yeah,
Not
he's.
sure how many trivia things I know about him, but
I don't know. We're going to find out. Here's our question: what
okay.
famous catchphrase did Johnny Carson use to introduce his monologue on the Tonight Show? I assume that was delivered by
Oh
Ed
my
McMahon.
gosh.
I
It's not "Here's Johnny," is it?
I think it's gotta be. Let's find out. So we're gonna see how we do here. Here's Johnny. Let's see what
Okay.
AI is gonna bring. That's absolutely correct. Ding, ding,
Oh,
ding.
yes.
Here's Johnny was Johnny Carson's iconic catchphrase as he made his grand entrance on The Tonight
Yes.
Show. Absolutely
And it was
awesome.
very long and drawn out. "Here's Johnny," right?
Exactly
So,
right.
yeah,
Yep.
famous Ed McMahon. Yep.
Awesome. Well, you crushed that. This is amazing. I love Johnny Carson, and I
Well,
love this conversation. But Tammy, aside from the trivia question, I'll ask you a very much more
mhm.
powerful question, which is where can my listeners go to learn more about you and about Dacos?
Yes, I think an easy way to access a lot of information would just be on my website. Um, it's tammy-day.com, which is Tammy, uh, dash dot day, very easy. So that would have information about me, about my book, other resources I've produced, different podcasts I've been on. So that's a nice starting point. My book is also available on Amazon, um, or through me, but for a lot of people, Amazon, love or hate it, it's the easy way to access things like that. And then Deikos.com is our website. We have an entire section about Deikos for Good. So if you want to look at what kinds of investments our community investment committee has made, or you're trying to do something, you want to see their funding request form, or who knows what, our corporate philosophy, B Corp reports, those are all on there. So that would be a good wealth of information to get started. And then I love to talk to people. So you can reach out to me through my website. And I'd love to have a conversation about, what you're doing, what your company's doing, how we can help each other, move things forward.
So amazing. Tammy, I'm going to have those show notes. We'll have those links that Tammy just shared with
Okay.
us listeners. So you're only one click away from learning all about Tammy's work, her book, Deikos, everything else. Tammy, I'm just so pleased and impressed that we were able to have this conversation. I love the work you're doing. I'm all about it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Yes. Thank you very much. Happy to be here and would love to continue anytime. So let me know.